right, hello and welcome to today's webinar, Driving Accuracy and Efficiency, TaylorMade's Labeling Transformation with TEKLYNX. Today's speaker is Casey Ciano, the Enterprise Executive at TEKLYNX. Before we get into today's presentation, I wanted to first go into a little bit about AIM. AIM is the global industry alliance for stakeholders of RFID, barcoding, smart devices, and other automatic identification and data capture technologies, and supporting blockchain, IoT, and RTLS applications. We represent all industries and organizations that use, implement, resell, or develop technology. We are essential to enabling adoption, growth, and interoperability to those who depend on accurate, available, and identifiable data. If you would like additional information, you can reach out to us at info@aimglobal.org. I'd like to also quickly review our antitrust policy. It is the policy of AIM to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. And then a few other housekeeping notes before we get started. All registrants are muted upon entering the webinar, but we still encourage you to participate. To send a question, select the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. We'll get to as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation, and also a recording of the webinar will be available in the coming days to those that have registered. And I would like to now turn it over to today's speaker, Casey.
Thank you very much, Bethany. Let me share my screen here. You should all be seeing that now. So perfect. So again, thank you for attending today's web presentation, Driving Accuracy and Efficiency, TaylorMade's Labeling Transformation with TEKLYNX. I'll be walking you through today's presentation, and let's get to the agenda here. Pretty quick agenda. Introduction to TEKLYNX, if you don't know who we are already, and an introduction to TaylorMade if you're not much of a golfer. We'll be talking about the challenges that TaylorMade faced before coming in and communicating with TEKLYNX about some things that we can offer, covering some of the solutions that we're able to provide TaylorMade and kind of what those solutions provided from a results perspective. And then, as Bethany mentioned, we'll be doing Q&A at the end. So, don't be shy. If you do have questions during the presentation, make sure you chat those in there. I am myself very guilty of having a question, forgetting it, and then not remembering it. So get them in there early. We can make sure we cover those at the end. So let's get started with introductions. So if you don't know who TEKLYNX is, TEKLYNX, we're a global leader in barcode labeling design and print automation software. We have over 30 years of labeling experience. Myself, I've worked at TEKLYNX for about just under 18 years now. We have over 750,000 installations across 120 countries worldwide. And we are really a world leader in all AIDC technology. So when it comes to, mom and pop shops trying to print a label, all the way up to companies like TaylorMade with a global footprint that need to meet some strict demands and validation requirements, from a TEKLYNX perspective, we have a solution for you. And then moving on to TaylorMade. So I am a golfer. I actually use TaylorMade golf clubs, so it was pretty fortuitous that we were able to work together. They're a leading manufacturer of high-performance golf equipment, golf balls, and accessories. If you watched any golf, you've definitely seen TaylorMade on your TV screens there. They are headquartered in Carlsbad, California, and they do have global offices in Canada, UK, China, Australia, and a couple of other ones that are actually coming online. I was just on the calls with them this morning talking about a new facility. So definitely a global reach from a company perspective and a footprint perspective. They combine precision engineering and advanced materials for performance-driven products. And we were very happy to kind of bring that mindset into their labeling environment as well, which we will be getting into. So moving into that, what was TaylorMade's labeling environment before TEKLYNX? As I mentioned, they did have their corporate headquarters in California, the US, but they have locations in Canada, UK, Korea, Japan, Australia, China, all ranging from print volumes from 1,000 to 15,000 labels per day. So when you extrapolate that across, a year, we're talking well over, 250,000 labels being printed by TaylorMade. So definitely not a small volume. Designing labels, whether that was new ones or changes, took 2 to 3 weeks plus 1 or 2 more weeks for customer specific versions. So you can see it wasn't very, you're not very flexible when it comes to change management in TaylorMade's environment. Not only that, they were actually leveraging a third-party WMS and their support and their staff to make those changes. So any sort of changes, whether it was a small change to a barcode or more of a larger change to a barcode, came with a cost, and some of those costs were at the $8,000 mark, which is definitely not cheap, and from an ROI perspective, definitely a metric that we took a look at. So, what were some of those challenges that were causing some of those problems? So, like I mentioned, they were leveraging their warehouse management system as sort of their labeling solution as well. And, warehouse management systems are great at what they do, but sometimes they're not so great at the labeling aspect of it. And I think they were definitely running into some of those issues. The software limitations and some of the flexibilities, or some of the lack of flexibility that we had on the WMS side, were really just causing a lot of inefficiencies. There were duplicate labels, data sources weren't really available. TaylorMade was wasting, 25 to 50% in wasted label stock. And, like I mentioned before, when we're run rate is, 250,000, 300,000 labels a year, that's a lot of money that's being end up on the, warehouse floor. The lack of support for QR codes was a big one for them, including GS1 support. They were printing linear barcodes, but obviously that is something that's still in place, but it's something that's sort of not being phased out, but being complemented, with QR codes and RFID as we kind of move towards that sort of future set. And then, depending on the label that needed to be designed or changed, it was going up to 10 different individuals across the organization, and maybe even someplace out of the organization, just to make sure that, the label that finally did make it to production was one that was approved by all parties, and hopefully wasn't one of those duplicates that I did mention. So what were the solutions? So after much discussion and demonstrations and really making sure that TEKLYNX understood those pain points that I had mentioned, myself and the sales engineering team came up with CODESOFT and SENTINEL. So what are CODESOFT and SENTINEL? So CODESOFT is the enterprise label design product that TEKLYNX offers to the market. Big labels, small labels, we can really do anything inside of CODESOFT when it comes to label requirements. I will actually, let me do this. We'll do a little bit more to just show you a PowerPoint. Let me pull up CODESOFT here. I can kind of show you a little bit about that. Can you all see that? Hopefully so. There we go. So this is CODESOFT. I mean, if you've used one label designer, you've used a lot of label designers, but I'm a little biased. I do think ours is a bit better. We try to create the interface based on Microsoft products, so you'll see ribbons, things like that. It really helps cut down on training and keeps the program something that people are familiar with, even if they're novices at label design training. On the left-hand side here, you'll see sort of the static information, but one thing I did want to point out is the barcode generation tool. We do, again, support all the different linear barcodes that are out there in the market, GS1 linear barcodes, postal barcodes, the 2Ds that I mentioned as well, all within the application. Very easy to switch back and forth depending on, which barcode symbology you're looking for. And one of the things that TaylorMade really wanted to make sure that they had was sort of GS1 compliance, which I know is a big deal for, a lot of global manufacturers. We do have a GHS or a GS1 wizard listed in here as well. We support, again, the standards, but then also the QR codes and things like that. And we do support the new GS1 digital link, so the digital passport. I know that's something that's fairly big in Europe right now. I know it's coming over to the States as well, so I expect that's a feature that we're going to be using pretty predominantly when it comes to GS1 customers that need to design in CODESOFT and TEKLYNX products. On the right-hand side here, this is where we start looking at some of the data sources and some of the things that can really make the labels work for you, which is what we were able to do for TaylorMade. We were able to connect to different databases, whether that's an Excel spreadsheet, a SQL database, Oracle database. We can support it. Date codes, best by dates, product dates. We can use, as opposed to having the user enter that in. Maybe we can have it come from the system, which really lowers the amount of clicks that the user needs to do to complete their job. Formulaic things that we can do there. That's where a label can really be designed to do a lot of the heavy lifting as far as the data that's being fed to it, which is something that TaylorMade took advantage of. It's not just sort of, trim factors and things like that that can manipulate the data on the label itself. We can do if-then logical statements, really make sure that, if customer A is printing a label, or if we're printing a label for customer A, show this picture. If we're printing a label for customer B, show this picture. So as opposed to having, 15 different static labels, we're able to kind of templatize that and make it a little bit easier for people to manage from a labeling library perspective. And that's kind of what this label shows. This is just a demonstration label. Obviously, it's not a TaylorMade label. They don't sell trucks. But you can see we've already got it connected to a database. We're leveraging some formulas to kind of merge some of the data pieces or data parts into the barcode itself. And when I click print, you can now see that this one template is supporting all of these different SKUs, with really the only information that's changing is specific to that part number. So these are just some of the things that CODESOFT can provide from a design standpoint that make the printing of the label that's designed more simple. which at the end of the day is really what we're looking for, is the efficiencies and being able to print the right label to the right printer in as little as time as possible. We also support a whole bunch of different print drivers as well. We actually design these in-house. These are TEKLYNX print drivers, and obviously, we work hand in hand with all the major players out there. You can see a lot of the ones that I have installed here. I think our label print library is over 3,000, I want to say. But I have yet to run into a customer that we can't support from a thermal transfer printer perspective. We also support RFID. And if for some reason we need to print labels to, a Lexmark or a Canon, maybe someone needs to print out a work order or something like that, we can also support Windows drivers as well. But you can kind of see on some of these, because they're TEKLYNX print drivers and we're able to kind of drive a bit more efficiencies out of them, we get a little bit better of a DPI than maybe what the standard driver is going to get you. So CodeSoft, from a design, very easy to use, feature base is pretty extravagant. And we can really support printing that label to any sort of printer that the customer may need to print to. TaylorMade specifically with zebras, which is why I kind of wanted to highlight that, but don't feel like we need to print to zebras, though obviously we can. So that's CodeSoft. That was the design piece there. Let me minimize that, or I guess I can close it here for us. The second piece is, obviously after you design a label, you need to print a label, right? And that's where the Sentinel piece comes in. So Sentinel is a print automation tool that we offer from TEKLYNX. It's an off-the-shelf, out-of-the-box tool that basically sits on the back end of really any business system and waits for print actions in that business system that would require a label. So, think of someone in SAP or a business is hitting submit order, finish order, or maybe there's even a print button. That business system will then send a command to Sentinel. Sentinel will look at that command, look at what printer we need to send it to, the label that we want to print out, where that data needs to go on that label, and then sends it to the printer without the user ever even knowing that we are there in a fraction of a second. So if we do this right, the users that are actually printing the labels don't even know that we're kind of handshaking in the background. And at the end of the day, if we can have a user just interfacing out of their ERP, well, hey, that's one thing that we have to train them on, and it keeps everything a bit more efficient. Now, Sentinel can accept commands in a multitude of different ways. The most common files like a drop file, CSV file, XML file. But with people moving to cloud interfaces or cloud systems, we can also leverage like a REST API call via JSON string. The same information is required, but it's just a little bit more of a cleaner transaction from a handshake perspective between two different software applications. There's a couple other pieces in there. I think those two are the ones that I kind of want to highlight because those are the most common, but we can also monitor databases and some other things. But essentially, TaylorMade's business system is sending us a drop file that we are executing on and printing their labels accordingly. So when you combine the two of them, CodeSoft as a design tool, Sentinel as a print automation tool, really kind of gives them the best of both worlds. So what were some of those results? So TaylorMade, when they moved to CodeSoft and Sentinel, we're able to eliminate that third-party software maintenance. So again, those $8,000 costs for label changes went away. They also are installing this application inside their 4 virtual walls. So they have full control over the hardware aspect of it and the server aspect of it, which has really made things a lot more efficient for them from a maintenance perspective. The time required to design a new label template from start to finish was, it used to be weeks. Now it's less than a day. We just make some simple changes there. And they've really taken advantage of sort of that templatization approach. So instead of having, I think their label library was close to 500, not counting duplicates, we're now down to just 13 smart templates that support their order labels, serial number labels, their value-added service labels, their certificate of conformity labels, and they can support those 2D barcodes, like I mentioned, which has made their customers much happier because now the information that they need to get that in stock is included in that 2D barcode, which has just made the whole process from manufacturing to shipping to acceptance much more simple. They currently have 5 installations of CodeSoft and Sentinel worldwide. And like I mentioned, I just got off the phone with them this morning. We're expanding probably to another one. So they've definitely seen the value of our applications. And they're not just happy with what they have, they're asking for more, which is always a good thing. And I think one of the bigger things to look at too from a metric perspective is that, from a accuracy standpoint, 85% to 99% on 250,000, 300,000 labels per year is incredible cost savings. I think they essentially got an ROI on the solution within 3 to 4 months of actually implementing it. So, from a dollars and cents perspective, it definitely made sense to, move towards the TeKLYNX side of the coin. There. Now I know we had some questions coming into the demonstration. Do we want to start handling some of those now?
Yeah, we can start getting the questions in. All right. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions through the registration page. We're going to start to get into some of those questions. Our first question today is, what advice would you give to another company that's considering moving from manual or vendor-dependent labeling to an automated system?
I think the big piece there is, I think data is important. Knowing where the data is and where it's coming from, because if we're automating a system, we are taking a lot of the user interaction that from a manual perspective out. So the system needs to know the data and needs to pass the data appropriately. So I think being able to map that is definitely very important. And then being able to outline what your preferred process is. We see a lot of people who say, well, we do it this way. And then we ask the question, well, why? And they say, well, because we always have, right? That's the one we always get. And I think that is a red flag as far as, well, what do we want to do versus what have we been doing? So I think those are some good things that we always try to ask a customer, when we start the automation conversation.
And then another question that we had, what was the biggest challenge during TaylorMade's transition to Sentinel, and how was it overcome?
I think it was two pieces. One is getting them to understand that the third-party system, though it was great at what it did, didn't have the capacity that they needed on the labeling side of things. And just getting them to understand that there's the right tool for the right job. TeKLYNX isn't trying to be an ERP system or an SAP or WMS or MES or whatever business system acronym that you want to throw out there. We do labeling, and we do labeling well. So when you can get the best out of the labeling system and then the best out of the ERP, that's the best for everybody there.
Right. And then our next question, how did centralizing label management improve operations across global facilities?
Well, I think now they're all being managed the same. It kind of goes back to that process discussion, as opposed to this facility doing it their way and this facility doing it that way, and this works for us, and we have our own templates, and you have your own templates. We were really able to standardize all of those things across the globe, and then put processes in place for change management. So instead of people just kind of being the wild, wild west of labeling, we're able to put some rules of the road as far as who's allowed to do what and what process was in place when you needed to make those changes or add printers and things like that.
And then our next question, I think you kind of briefly touched on this in your demonstration, but has TeKLYNX incorporated a solution for GS1 digital link, and can the software convert between GS1 syntaxes?
Yes. So yeah, I did. I can bring this up here. That's essentially what I was showing you here on this wizard, is we do have the ability in 2025. So if you're on older versions, you may not see this because it is sort of a new GS1 mandate. You can see here, we've got all the GS1s listed. And then if we need to do the one specifically for the GS1 digital link, we can include it right there. And then as far as switching things back and forth, with GS1, you have a lot of AIs and things like that. And some barcodes need certain AIs, some barcodes don't need certain AIs and those types of things. So you got to make sure you're looking at the structure as well. You do have the ability to kind of switch things back and forth pretty quickly when you're designing the label through the wizard. And then once the label's actually created, let's say, hey, this customer changed their requirements and this needs to be a 2D barcode for some reason. It's as simple as going into there, clicking here, choosing the QR code, and all that same data that was in the linear barcode is now encoded in this 2D barcode. So again, pretty good example of how easy it is to change a label based on requirements when leveraging TeKLYNX.
And then a next question, do you see the need to develop solutions to interact with the end customer, such as QR codes, NFC, RFID, etc.?
I'm not sure on that question. So from a TEKLYNX perspective, we can print out all those barcodes. So again, we support RFID. You've seen, obviously, we support QR codes, 2D linears, those types of things. I think where our application provides the most value to the customer is when we give them the tool, the world is sort of their oyster. They can design whatever label they want. They can create big labels, small labels. We support labels that go on motherboards and cell phone components, which obviously need to be very, very small. And then we also support, GHS labels that go on barrels that get sunk into the bottom of the ocean for 6 months to test if they're meeting spec and validation. So I think where TEKLYNX, where we design our software, is to give the customer the power to do what they need to do on the labeling side of things.
All right. As I mentioned, if you guys have any questions, you can add them to the Q&A application at the bottom of the screen. But Casey, if you want to go into how people can reach out to you directly to hear more about the solution.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got our contact information on here, TeKLYNX Americas, sales@teklynx.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well. If you guys want to go ahead and search me out on there, feel free to throw me a friend request and throw me a chat. We can set something up. Really whatever it is, whether it's big or small, labeling, TeKLYNX wants to support you all. So again, just let us know. We're happy to help. And, at the end of the day, we want to get you the right product for the right price. And really that's our goal at the end of the day.
If you guys have any more questions about AIM, you can reach out through the information listed on the screen. Wanted to thank you, Casey, for your presentation today and telling us a little bit more about your winning case study.
Yeah, no, definitely appreciate the time. AIM, you guys are a great organization. Bethany, you've been great to work with. I think we're all better off with you guys running the show on these things. So definitely appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Take care, everybody. Bye.